Persona 5. It's one of those games I would definitely recommend to anyone. It's one of my favorite games of the year, and it really stood out. There's a lot of parts in the game that really made me hooked and engaged. I found myself playing this game nonstop. As soon as I beat the game, I went immediately back into a new game plus of the same game because the game is just that good. I really found myself enjoying myself within the game. I enjoyed the gameplay, the story, the music. There's all these components within it that really stood out to me. So let's look at the music. The music is phenomenal. As soon as the soundtrack was available to be purchased on iTunes, I definitely went out to buy it. The tracks are all memorable, they're very emotional, and they complement the game very well. For example, the track Last Surprise is the song you listen to in every single combat that you come across in this game, outside of mini bosses and the main bosses of the game. Last Surprise is very upbeat, very quick, and just a nice upbeat jazzy tune, which, in my opinion, kind of conveys the flow of battle. The combat is very fluid and it's very quick and upbeat, which is why the track of Last Surprise really works in the game's favor. The final boss theme of Jagloboth, or however you say his name, is one of my favorite tracks of the game. I love all the tracks in the game for sure, but this one definitely sends chills down my spine every time I listen to it. It's just that good. The visuals. It is a PS3 game, but it was, got delayed so many times that it eventually got ported to the PS4. So the visuals might not be groundbreaking or pushing the PS4 to the limit, but for the aesthetic and style that Atlas is trying to come across with an anime look, it really succeeds in that regard. The game runs smoothly, the character models look nice, the persona models look nice, the shadows look good, the character designs are all unique and really comes to their personalities. When you look at Makoto's design, it really reads very well. You kind of know what she's all about just by looking at her. And that's what I feel is missing in a lot of games these days. You don't really see a lot of thought and effort put into the character design as much as I see with Persona 5. There might be some exceptions to the rule, or there might be some other games that definitely have well designed character designs, sure, but I think Persona 5 really celebrates in that design just by looking at the enemies. Each enemy is more memorable than the last, especially with the boss fights. When you go from the Kamoshida boss fight to the Madarame fight to the Kaneshiro to the one in Futaba's palace and so on and so forth, you will definitely look at these shadows and really have a lasting impression of them. And that's really what I liked about it. Visually, this game is engaging and it's very mesmerizing. And this might sound a little goofy, might sound silly or stupid, but I found myself really enjoying the menus. Yeah, the menus. Usually in JRPGs or just in any game in general, they usually make the menus serviceable. So it's this generic kind of shapes or color schemes that they use for menus, while in Persona 5, it definitely looks like someone took hours crafting a engaging looking menu system. The sharp edges really contrast with what's going on screen. The colors that they use pop. Everything about the menus pop. So I found myself really going through all these menus just for the sake of it. I really enjoyed the menu design and the user interface. This is what more developers should be trying to accomplish. Making fun fucking menus. The fact that I'm just taking the time to discuss about the menus really speaks volumes as to why the menu system is so fucking good and how the art direction can really make a huge difference with games. The gameplay. Now, I'm not much of a turn-based fan. I don't like turn-based combat. I never really liked it to begin with. So when I really got into Persona 5, I just kind of got into the game just on a whim, just to see if I'd like it any more or less, see if it would change my opinion on the whole genre itself. And this game has succeeded with that. I really found myself enjoying the combat. Be it, in the beginning of the game, I wasn't taking the confidants seriously, I wasn't really trying to build my character that much, but around the third boss, the third dun palace I was going through, I started to take the time to go through my confidants. And I found myself really enjoying the experience of going through palaces, deciding just how far to make it before heading out of the palace for the day. The game runs on a SP meter. The SP meter is basically the amount of special attacks your persona can use. Depending on the persona attack, it will take a certain amount of that meter. So usually when you're going through a palace, I would find myself really looking at the SP meter and planning my dungeon crawling based on the meter itself. So if I had a full SP meter, I would just go as far as I can. If I have like maybe 10 SP left, I would really start to think maybe I should either switch a party member out, or maybe I should head out of the palace and spend some time building confidant ranks the next day. Each palace runs on a time limit. Some palaces have more time than others, I feel like. The one I felt more crunched on time was the Kenishiro Palace. That one felt a little too tight, almost. I felt like I just finished that palace just, with one day left, which is insane. While the Futaba Palace, for example, kind of gave me a lot of time to get through that palace. The other thing I enjoyed was the boss fights. The only boss fight I genuinely could not beat and I needed to seek help was the Madarame fight. That one gave me so much challenge. I almost wanted to stop playing the game because it was just too hard for me. And I played on normal, so I guess it's kind of embarrassing for me to admit that, but I wasn't really focused on my confidence at the time. I didn't really rank up my character. I didn't really spend much time in mementos. So I can't really say I was too shocked that Madarame was giving me such a hard time. So I had my friend come in and beat the boss for me. But other than that, that was the only boss fight I sought help in. Every other boss fight after that I did on my own to kind of make up for that, and I found myself enjoying the boss fights on their own. I really enjoyed the level of strategy and challenge. Be it that the Madarame boss fight might have been hard for me, but it never really felt like it was the end all be all for me. I might have stopped playing the game for a while, but I definitely saw myself going back into Persona 5 in the future trying to beat that boss regardless, because ultimately the game might be challenging for newcomers or people who never played a JRPG before like myself, but the challenge is rewarding once you beat something. And that's what I like about Persona 5 in general. I thought the difficulty spikes and levels were fair. I never felt like the game was cheating me. I never felt like that I was robbed in certain parts. I felt that everything that was going on in the game was fair and justified. If I died, I knew it was either just because of my character being low level, or maybe I wasn't well prepared for a certain fight. And I really like that. I really like the level of strategy that this game kind of encourages the player to incorporate, especially with the confidants. With confidants, you can build up your party members' ranks to either pass over the baton if you exploit a enemy's weakness, or they might take a hit for you, etc. There's a lot of benefits to building up your confidants both within your team and with NPCs around the town. The open worldness of the game is so freeing. Once you get past the beginning, the game definitely opens up and you feel like you are definitely immersed within this universe. You definitely feel like, oh, I'm going around each storefront and each job, going to school and doing all these things. And oddly enough, this game makes those mundane tasks enjoyable, which is really hard to do. If I told you that, oh, this game, you go to work, you go to school, you have to answer questions, and that's a lot of fun, you would probably think I'm insane. But those parts of the game are really enjoyable because it's fun to read these questions and trying to come up with an answer, or seeing what happens when you answer a question right or wrong. It's somewhat enjoyable to a degree. And that's really what I like about Persona 5. It takes this mundane nonsense and makes it enjoyable and not drag on. I thought I was going to get bored with this, but honestly, I really enjoyed myself, finding myself lost in time, trying to go to the batting cages, going to Big Bang Burger, etc. Finding things to do within my free time that the game allowed me was really enjoyable, and it felt like a whole other level of strategy aside from going through palaces. Mementos is a lot of fun to go through as well. Mementos is ongoing dungeon basically that you're trying to get to the bottom, which the bottom of Mementos is a palace of itself, and that's a lot of fun to get through as well. Honestly, the depths of Mementos might be my favorite palace in the entire game completely because I loved its design. I love that it oozed a lot of story thematics going into it. It was very abstract. I really enjoyed it. It's really one of my favorite palaces because it was challenging and it was just fun to kind of see how the palace was designed, and it was very interesting to see, uh, where to go next. It really made me want to keep playing. I found myself playing the Depths of Mementos the longest out of all the games. I would really push myself in that dungeon because I really loved its design that much. The story, another big component with Persona 5. Obviously, Persona 5 is a narrative driven game, so story is the centerpiece of the entire game. I really loved the story. I thought it was well paced. I really liked the beat of it, the rhythm of it. The pacing was really, really good on a lot of parts. Be it that there's only two parts of the story that really drag on for me. Most notably is the beginning. When you do a new game plus of Persona 5, the beginning just feels painful at times because the story spends its time kind of explaining how the game works. It really explains the story. It takes a lot of time setting things up, and it kind of feels slow, but it doesn't feel like torture at the same time either. The other times it drags is the middle, where you get to Hawaii. That can be kind of boring and dragging, but at the same time, it can be entertaining in some ways. But the overall story really, really holds up, and to me, it makes up for these shortcomings. A lot of people complain about the obvious plot twist with Akechi. Honestly, I didn't really care about that. I disliked Akechi to begin with. I thought Akechi was a terrible character. I fucking hated that guy. No matter what that character would have done by the end of the game, I still hated that character. I don't care. Oh, Theo, Akechi sacrificed himself for you guys in the story. I don't give a fuck. That guy was an asshole. I really could not stand Akechi in that game. I really couldn't. But the obviousness of that plot twist I thought was fine because the story in of itself is kind of it has kind of been done before. The only thing that's been kind of out there and different is just really kind of the thematic things it was going for. But the whole concept of the Phantom Thieves, and then there's this big heist that they planned, and then this one guy that they brought into the team was a double crosser or whatever, was kind of a to be expected kind of moment. I felt that was kind of obvious to begin with, and I thought that was fine. I thought it, in some ways, the corniness of the story benefited the story because I felt that the game story was self-aware in what it was doing. It was kind of goofy in a way. It made me think of Gurren Lagann. Gurren Lagann is the most over-the-top, goofy anime you could find next to Kill la Kill and so on from Studio Trigger, but this game kind of connects to the thematic and tone that Gurren Lagann had, where it can tell serious moments within the story, but it knows what to take not so seriously. And I thought that with these plot twists, it kind of fell in line with that. The pacing of the story was, as I said, fine overall. So, despite the two parts that dragged on, I thought that the story was very personal and it felt clever in a lot of ways, especially near the end. When you get to the depths of Mementos and you see really what you've been doing to these distorted hearts, really made you think about what you were really doing throughout the whole game. And I had this really weird thought going in saying, well, these shadows that are distorted really show the dark desires of mankind. We all have these dark parts of our personality we love to indulge ourselves in sometimes. We all have these dreams of lust or gluttony or sloth. We have all these sins that we kind of indulge ourselves from time to time. And this game really shows what happens when that either becomes out of check, and when that becomes unbalanced and distorted, it can lead to very dark paths that we can take on our own. But at the same time, though, when we start to follow with these rules of, well, we cannot really do these sinful acts, we cannot just lust after every single person in our school, or we cannot, exploit people for money as much as Kenashiro, or what have you. These dark acts, but we all act within these rules. So when they're trying to free society from these chains of fate, or trying to impose rules, who's really the bad guy there? And I feel like that kind of theme really illustrates itself very well with the depths of Memento. So we start to see that is what the main character's doing really the right thing, because you're kind of making people more like prisoners in the real world by making them kind of change their personality. You're making them kind of to conform in an appropriate behavior, which is obviously, obviously we want people to kind of be punished for their crimes, but in the sense of the Phantom Thieves, they're kind of forcing it. They're kind of forcing them to conform to these beliefs, or to these sets of rules that we have imposed as a society, and all these things that are kind of talked about within the last leg of the game that really started to dismantle the vision that these Phantom Thieves have as characters. And then you see the true plot twist, the one that in a way is as obvious as MGS5's endgame twist. That you find out that Igor is not the real Igor throughout the entire game, but really the final boss. You're fighting the Holy Grail, and that's something that is really painfully obvious, but at the same time, it's kind of funny and interesting in that regard. You are fighting a fucking god at the end of the game. That alone really made me love the whole journey of the game. It made me really sit there. It's like, you know what? In the beginning of the game, you were just going after these small-time characters like Kamoshida and Madarame to some extent. These are just like kind of goofy little escapades that eventually unfolded to a government conspiracy and then to a whole thing with God. And as I said earlier, it reminds me so much of Gurren Lagann. Gurren Lagann just started as a story where these characters are trying to buzz onto the surface, trying to fight the Spiral King, but by the end of the show, they fight basically a god. They fight through, the universe and all this weird over-the-top nonsense, and this game kind of simulates that, and it was intense. It was really empowering to see really the accumulation to everything you've done within the game itself. I really loved the journey and the plot twist that came about within this journey. I'm going through the game again, and I'm seeing some subtle hints as to the ending of the game that I didn't really think about when I played the game before. So it's really interesting that a story was able to tell itself straightforward, and then when you play the game again, the game kind of has a whole new meaning when you see all of what the game has to offer. I really loved the story. It's one of the best parts of Persona 5, and it really is a huge component of it. If you're gonna get Persona 5, you're mostly getting it for the story and the gameplay, and the music is just the icing on top. This game is one of my favorite games of the year. I cannot honestly with a good conscience say that this game was anything more than a perfect fucking game. I would give this game a 10 out of 10. The flaws in the game that it might have with the pacing are just there. I'm able to overlook it because I enjoyed the entire game on its own, and this was my first outing in the Persona series, so maybe that's why I feel this way towards this game, but it definitely did make me want to go into this series a little bit more. As we speak, I'm playing Persona 3 on my PSP, and that might be another video on its own. Thank you for watching this video. Hope to see you in the next one.